Hello, I'm Martin Romjue, editor of Charged Fleet and a fleet content editor here at Bobbitt Business Media. Welcome to the Fleet Momentum series. I'm joined today by Michael Bloom, the Vice President of Products for SmartWitness, a global provider of video, telematics, and data, and sponsor of this video. Today's topic centers around artificial intelligence and how it relates to video-based fleet telematics. We've been hearing a lot in the fleet world about such terms as AI, advanced driver safety systems, machine learning, and predictive technologies. There seems to be some confusion about what these overlapping terms truly mean and how they are used. With Michael's help, we would like to clarify the terms and concepts and give fleet managers more knowledge about the options they will encounter. Thank you for joining us, Michael.
Thanks, Martin.
Let's start with some basics first. What is the difference between telematics and video telematics as they apply to fleet operations?
So let me just start with this, right? If a picture is worth 1,000 words, what's a video worth? I mean, traditional telematics was really developed to help provide fleet operators with visibility into driver actions through, a myriad of numerical sensors such as location, and it gives heading and speed and braking, etc. Video telematics really expands beyond traditional telematics offerings, which include more things like contextual aware inputs, right? What were the road conditions like? How fast was braking compared to what was happening in front of the vehicle? What was the weather like? What was happening just before and just after the event? I mean, traditional telematics tells you sort of the who, what, when, where, and really tries to interpret what happened based on data. But video shows you exactly what happened, and it answers the questions how and why. So, in an accident with a commercial vehicle, I mean, most of us know this in the trade, the commercial driver has the presumption of guilt, really, right? And they sort of have to prove innocence. And video, it's sort of that smart, impartial witness that really exonerates them.
Now, beyond the obvious benefits of video being the tell-all, eye in the sky, eye on the street, how can cameras contribute to richer data about fleet operations?
Yeah. Well, here, let me do this. Let me sum this up, sort of by asking a question back to you, right? Which is, what would you consider richer data in terms of like charts and graphs and a story from the driver about an incident that occurred? Or is it really the video that you can replay to see what happened for yourself? Right? I mean, video isn't subjective. It shows what happened, how it happened, and it shows why. An Excel spreadsheet with second by second data, I mean, it's a ton of data. But which one would you rather have as defense in a court of law? Would you rather have the Excel table or would you rather have the video of the event? I mean, for me, I'd rather have the video.
So we've heard a lot about the term AI as well as smart safety products. These are used interchangeably. How would you distinguish between the two? And where does ADAS fit in between those two concepts?
Let me give you sort of an example of AI from our industry, right? It could go something like this, let's say. A computer is going to learn, let's say, various patterns associated with a particular driver's driving behavior. Things like how fast do they accelerate on an expressway on-ramp, or do they speed up at intersections, or do they drive slower in wet conditions? I mean, humans are traditionally, we kind of do the same thing over and over again, actually. We get into routines. And so computers can identify those routines and they can sort of map that. And then after the learning occurs, the computer can accurately identify sort of which driver is driving a vehicle based on pattern recognition with those previous driving behaviors. So if somebody consistently drives slower in wet conditions and speeds up at intersections, not everybody does that. The computer can identify that, and when that event so the pattern, when it recognizes that pattern, it's going to say, oh, that's Michael driving, right? That's not Martin. And it can start to recognize those kinds of things. That's artificial intelligence for you right there. Um, but if you look at this is where the problem lies, though. If you look at sort of some of the OEMs, the vehicle manufacturers, and some of the video telematics companies out there, they've built certain ADAS functionality as AI, and ADAS is basically assisted driving. So it could be something as simple as assisted cruise control. When you set your cruise control and it maintains a certain distance between the vehicle in front of you, and it will speed up and it will slow down based on what that vehicle does. That's ADAS, right? It's basically helping you to drive. The problem is that the OEMs have made some of that safety related technology pervasive, right? And we see it in new vehicles that you would buy today. It has some element of ADAS. Actually, almost all of them do. And I think the industry has sort of grabbed onto those safety features, and they're calling that as like AI, as intelligence, but it really isn't. It's just great safety technology, right? So for example, forward collision warning. This is a feature that many in the industry are sort of touting as being AI, but really it's just sensor data. It's just measuring the distance between, your vehicle and something else in front of it, and it's using math to calculate potential impact based on speed and distance. That's not really true AI. That's more like radar or sonar, and guess what? Those things have been around before AI was even a term. So,
Well, speaking of terms, you introduced another one in your answer, machine learning.
yeah.
And I was interested in knowing, when it comes to AI and machine learning, what is the proper context for each, and how do they complement each other?
Yeah. Okay. That's a good question. So, I think machine learning is a component of AI, right? So AI is sort of the higher level thing. And machine learning is really, it's training a machine of some concept that AI can then use as an input to make decisions. So let me give you an example. There was a early exercise that Google did a long time ago where they were trying to train a computer to identify a tree. And what they would do is they would show the computer an image of a tree and say, this is a tree. And then they'd show a different image and say, this is a tree. And a different image and say, this is a tree. And after they did that thousands and thousands of times, the computer finally reached a point where they showed it an image of a tree and the computer was like, that's a tree. That's machine learning, right? It's the repetitive nature of something that basically is training or teaching the AI of what something is. It's no different than training your toddler. What's the color red versus the color blue, and that's really machine learning. The magic comes when sort of an autonomous vehicle is driving, and let's say it's driving down the road and it recognizes a fallen tree in the road, right? And it stops the vehicle because it realizes, ooh, trees are hard and driving into one isn't going to end well for the vehicle or the passengers, right? That's the AI component. So it's taken what it's learned through machine learning, and it's making that, it's applying that through real life applications and then making decisions based on that learning.
Well, speaking of vehicles driving into trees, unless there's no driver, it's usually the result of driver behavior and driving behavior. Those two terms sound very similar. So what exactly is the difference, and how can AI help fleets avert risk with drivers?
Yeah. So, I think there's a really big difference actually between driver behavior and driving behavior. I think the industry thought that too initially, and I think most of the industry sort of gave up on trying to provide driving behavior because it's hard. And so the industry sort of defaulted to driver behavior because it's a lot easier. But I think it's a lot worse for the fleet manager, mostly because that means that in our context, in terms of video telematics, it means that they have to watch hours of false positive kinds of videos of events that aren't really risky driving. So, driver behavior leaves it up to the fleet manager to determine if the driver hit a pothole or if they hit another vehicle. Driving behavior tells you the difference because of some contextual awareness that points to what the vehicle was doing just prior to that shock event and just after that event, right? So what that means is that, the shock event that occurs in which, let's say, the vehicle's traveling 25 miles an hour before it hits that shocking event, which, in this case is a pothole, and then it's traveling 20 miles an hour afterwards, which means it hit something, it slowed down, but it still continued at a pretty brisk pace, right? We know that that wasn't a collision, because if it had hit a wall or a car, it wouldn't be doing 20 miles an hour after that hit, right? So there's no real need then to float that up to a fleet manager to have to review that video as an event, because we know it wasn't a collision.
I'd like to kind of close out with the whole theme of predictive technologies. And I think an example comes to mind is you have a fleet driver in a vehicle, and the computer voice comes on and says, "You'll be encountering a pothole in 12 minutes in the middle of a thunderstorm." Is that something we can realistically look forward to, or are there other predictive scenarios that can play into AI and continue enhancing the equipment and the telematics that fleets depend on?
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? Boy, I would love that, especially for my kids. Um, I think there is a limit to how intelligent cameras in the vehicle can be, while still having sort of a small enough form factor that doesn't obstruct the visibility of the windshield when you put it up and install it, and it's sort of low enough in cost that it's affordable for the average fleet. The problem that this causes is that you get a ton of false alerts, right? Which angers drivers and causes the fleet manager to lose confidence in the efficacy of the product, mainly because there's only so much horsepower you can put into a camera. To compensate for this, sort of older telematics companies started performing human review of videos before they sent them on to the fleet manager as a legit event. So basically, a video would come through, a human would review that and would say, "Yep, that was a false positive. Let's just ignore that," or "Yep, that was a problem that the fleet manager needs to see about. I'll send that off," right? And so you sort of had humans playing the triage, if you will, there. So I think the next generation of video telematics is one that's, it's really going to bring sort of the concept that's called machine vision. Here's another concept or term I'm throwing out there, but it's machine vision to market. And what that basically means is nothing more than it's training the computer to literally watch the video, right? I use watch loosely with air quotes there, but the computer watches the video of an event and makes the determination about what really occurred. And it removes sort of the element of human review. So I think machine vision will see what's happening. It will take into account the context using an AI platform, right? It'll take into account the context of what happened at the time. And it's going to accurately predict risk from hundreds of thousands of hours of footage that it'll have analyzed and learned from.
Well, unfortunately, we're limited on time right now, and there's certainly a lot more to talk about with all of these advances, and hopefully we can talk more in the future. Michael Bloom from SmartWitness, thank you very much for joining us in the Fleet Momentum series. If our viewers would like more insights and more resources, they should go to smartwitness.com.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly.
And there'll be plenty more there. So thanks for joining us, and we'll